Tonight we're going to start talking about how evolution is the foundation philosophy for Nazism. Hitler came to power because of American financiers' help. They wanted a war, they wanted an enemy, and Bill Still, I didn't have Bill Still's other book here, The Money Masters, but he also wrote this one, On the Horns of the Beast, about the Federal Reserve. Bill Still wrote a book called The Money Masters, where he describes in great detail how Hitler was given the money to come to power through the American bankers to help him rise to power to create another war, because who wins every war? The bankers. Right. Loan money to both sides, you win every time. Mussolini, the Italian dictator, was strongly influenced by the evolution philosophy. He thought the Italians were the superior race. In 1936, Italy invaded Ethiopia. Wanted to take over Ethiopia, Africa. They slaughtered them. Here's the Ethiopians with their spears and their swords against the Italians with tanks and airplanes. It was just a merciless slaughter. After all, they're just black. You know, they got to be inferior. That's the thinking that was motivated by, or that's the philosophy behind Mussolini's thinking. Hitler and Mussolini, of course, were allies for some of the war till Mussolini lost. Hitler thought the German race was superior, and they deserved to rule the world. Hitler said, by the way, Sir Arthur Keith is the same guy who wrote the book, he wrote the foreword to Darwin's book when it was republished. Darwin's 100-year anniversary book, the 1959 edition, which we have, Eric, they asked Arthur Keith to write the foreword to it because he was such a great famous evolutionist. Keith said, the German Führer has consistently sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. All you need to do is read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, which I was reading right here, and you will see Hitler's racism all through this thing. It's really pretty incredible. His philosophy really permeates just about every page of the book, his racist philosophy, thinking the German race is superior. It's pretty scary to read this, realizing how many people followed Hitler. And then, of course, what was the church doing? How could they fall for such a thing? Marvin Lutzer, the president of Moody Bible Institute, has written a great book, Hitler's Cross. What was the church doing? Why didn't the church oppose Hitler? If the Christians just would have stood up against him, they could have done, could have stopped him. The church swallowed it too. He goes through how the church was deceived. We'll get into more later. In Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, here on page 286, depending which edition you have, some editions it's other pages, but on page 286, Hitler said, no more than nature desires the mating of weaker with stronger individuals, even less does she desire the blending of a higher with a lower race. Since if she did, her whole work of higher breeding over perhaps hundreds of thousands of years might be ruined with one blow. Historical experience offers countless proofs of this. It shows with terrifying clarity that in every mingling of Aryan blood with that of lower peoples, the result was the end of a cultured people. Hitler somehow really honestly thought that the Aryan race was superior. They were the cultured people of the world, and the best thing that could happen to the world would be to kill everybody else. To let the Aryans succeed, okay, and take over. If you read this book, While 6 Million Died, this one, it absolutely will blow your mind of what were the people in the rest of the world doing. As I read this one, it just brought tears to my eyes over and over to realize how many people were duped by Hitler. In 1907, the United States had an immigration quota. Here's what this book says on page 133. Scientifically hazy theories of biological superiority and inferiority of various European races now began to dominate the formulation for immigration policy. In this atmosphere, the United States government appointed a 9-man immigration commission in 1907. After 3 years of work by a staff of 300 at a cost of $1 million back in 1907, that's a lot more money than it is now, the commission published a 42-volume report. This massive work supported the notion that Southern and Eastern Europeans were racially inferior to Northern and Western Europeans. So if you come from Southern or Eastern Europe, they thought you were racially inferior. That was a $1 million study done by the United States government in 1907. So America was just as racist. In this book, on page 204, they tell the story how Hitler offered to send the Jews to anybody who would take them. He said, okay, you think we're being mean to the Jews here? You want them? Hitler said, I'll pay for them to come to your place. We'll send them on luxury ships. Roosevelt refused to allow them to come to America. The immigration quotas in America were such that, hey, we don't want any Jews. They let a few come in. But the problem was, you had to have $10,000 to come into America, because they didn't want you to be a burden on the American system. Hitler, though, said, you can leave Germany if you want, but you can only take $4 with you. Well, that's pretty rough to start off with $4 and end up with $10,000 by the time you go on a 2-week trip across the ocean. So they were just really stuck. They tell the story in here of the 900 and some Jews who were on a boat that came to Havana, Cuba, and begged to be released. They went into the harbor. Here they could see all their relatives. Please let them off the boat. This is before Cuba was communist, okay? Please let them off the boat. Cuban officials refused. So they sailed up to Miami. They said, would you please let us come? They're killing the Jews over there in Germany. Miami officials said, no, you can't get off here. They sailed up and down the coast of the United States begging for asylum and were refused at every port in America. What happened to the Jews, you're not going to understand World War II until you understand, while 6 million died, what were people thinking? Some people were thinking, well, they're inferior species. It goes right back to the evolution theory. When Jesse Owens won the Olympics, won, I think, 7 gold medals, or 9 gold medals, whatever it was, in 1936, Hitler walked out of the stadium. He said, it's unfair to make my men race against this animal. Jesse Owens said, I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler, but I wasn't invited to the White House to shake hands with the president either. He said, it's all right with me. I didn't go to Berlin to shake hands with him anyway. All I know is I'm here now and Hitler isn't. Jesse Owens, the black American athlete. Hitler's hit list, I discovered this when I was reading in Keene State, New Hampshire. They've got a section of the library up there at the Keene State University that is all books just about Hitler and the Holocaust. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, because I love to read about Hitler and the Holocaust, They got this huge section of the library, all books about Hitler. So I went in there, had 6 hours to spare before my next meeting. I had to speak somewhere at a church that evening. And I asked, they've got a librarian just in charge of that section. Or they did have it, I don't know if they still do. But I said, sir, why did Hitler kill the Jews? Why not somebody else? Well, he did kill a lot of people, but why did he hate the Jews so bad? For the next 6 hours, that guy brought me book after book after book. He said, oh, well, here, you can get it figured out from this and from this and from this. And we found Hitler's hit list. Why the Jews? Why not the Italians or the Spanish or the French? Or why Jews? Hitler thought the blonde-haired, blue-eyed the Norwegians, were close to pure Aryan. Make sure you take note of that. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, Norwegian. Vården står det till idag. Ja, sure, you betcha. Ofta. And he thought the Germans were blue-eyed or brown-eyed. That's less desirable. Blue eyes is the most desirable. Hey, they're mostly Aryan. It was a big deal in Germany to go around and check people's eyes to see what color they were. They had charts the doctors would use to see how much Aryan you were, what percentage Aryan. How many have seen that stuff before on TV, the kind of thing they did with checking the eyes, even checking, they call it phrenology, I believe, measuring the dimensions of the skull, different dimensions of the skull to find out how close to pure Aryan they were. He thought the Mediterraneans were slightly Aryan, the Slavic, half Aryan, half ape. Brother Pratsuk, you Slavic? Hitler thought you were half ape, half Aryan. He said the Orientals are slightly ape, the black Africans are mostly ape, and the Jews are close to pure ape. From the book Hitler Movement, page 107. The reason Hitler killed the Jews was because of his philosophy, his belief that they were an inferior species. And he thought, look, they're taking up valuable space that really belongs to the Germans. And as you read through his book, Mein Kampf, it's just scary to think that this guy thought this, okay? And then he hid behind the cloak of Christianity. He was a Catholic, and he wanted people to think, well, I'm doing this in the name of God to, purify the race. Because some renegade Catholic priest back in 1912, I believe, wrote a book claiming that, that years ago there were just two races, the apes and the Aryans. And they intermingled. And now we have a whole range of people, everything from ape to Aryan and everything in between. And we need to just eliminate all these inferior half-breeds and allow only the Aryans to survive. Hitler read that, believed it, and acted it out. Probably 13 million people died because of World War II. 6 million Jews were slaughtered in the camps. One of the Jewish doctors who survived the Holocaust later said, there's a difference between those who look upon their fellow human beings as common creatures of a common creator and those who look upon them as a conglomerate of biologicals and chemicals. Powerful statement here. If you look at somebody else and say, wow, God made this person, that makes you think of him one way. If you look at him through the eyes of a person who believes in evolution, hey, they're nothing but chemicals that got together by chance. That's what evolution teaches. This doctor ought to know. He was in the prison camp, okay? Now, the Jewish Talmud, this is something, Eric, you need to get down, because the Jewish, the Torah is the same Old Testament as we have. Okay. T-O-R-A-H, okay? Yeah, I don't know of any differences. There may be some little stuff, but very, very, very similar. The Talmud is a book of Jewish writers writing their ideas. It is not the Bible. So you've got to be real cautious if you get into a discussion if you're talking about the Talmud, which is not good, or the Torah, which is perfectly fine. The Jewish Talmud teaches that non-Jews are to be exterminated. See, they're just as racist as anybody else. They think they're superior. In the section of the Talmud called Yabamoth 98a, it says, all Gentile children are animals. In the minor Tractus, Sophorum 15, Rule 10, even the best of the Gentiles should all be killed. Nice guy, huh? Okay. You want to get the website Hoffman-info.com. He's got a ton of stuff on the Talmud. I met him when I was out in, speaking to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, out in that region. I don't think it's possible to fully comprehend what happened in World War II and what caused all this suffering until you see how evolution ties in. The more I read on Hitler, and I read a lot on Hitler just to keep my blood boiling, you know, and to try to understand why did he do this, the more it makes me angry that we are paying to have this same philosophy of evolution taught to our kids in this town today. They learned this. During World War II, I've had several people tell me this is true. I cannot document it. I'll just tell you what Milton Cooper said in his book, which I have in there, Behold a Pale Horse. He said, during World War II, a Polish salesman working for I.G. Farben Chemical Company. By the way, I.G. Farben Chemical Company was tied in with Rockefeller over here in America. The Rockefeller Standard Oil. Chemical company, remember, love of money, root of all evil. Okay. This guy, Polish salesman, sold cyanide gas, Zyklon B, and malathion to the Nazis to help exterminate the Jews at Auschwitz. After the war, he feared for his life, so he joined the Catholic Church and became a priest, 1946. In 1958, he was ordained as Poland's youngest bishop. After 30 days, the reigning pope was assassinated, and he became Pope John Paul II, the current pope right now. Interesting story. I want to get more documentation on that. Milton Cooper does a tremendous amount of research, and I know of no reason to doubt what he said, but so far I've been unable to prove this story is true, but it might be something you might want to watch for if you've seen it. Yep. That's the former cyanide salesman. What better place to hide than right out in the open? As I study and read on what happened with Hitler and the Holocaust, I'm constantly tying it in with why he did what he did. You know, what he did was horrible, but why? What would motivate a guy to do that? And I go back to his thinking. What you believe determines how you behave. When I read books like Peace Child and Eternity in Their Hearts, and Jan, have you read those missionary stories? Those natives over there in Papua New Guinea, you know, they teach their kids, now if you kill somebody in battle, be sure to cut off his head and eat the brains because you'll get his spirit. Well, of course, that's stupid, but if you tell that to a kid all his life when he's growing up, guess what he's going to do when he gets into battle? People do some pretty dumb things because of what they believe. If you believe the Jews are inferior, they're just animals, and you're the superior, you know, Aryan race, well then, it's really best to eliminate them. That's what happened here, Hitler and the Holocaust. So, as you read stories on what happened, you better tie it in with evolution. I've been to Germany 3 times, visited the Flossburg concentration camp. That's where they cut the stone out to make the big theater at Nuremberg. And I stood there at the theater and just wept and cried as I walked around this massive stone theater. Here I'm walking on these stones, and I had just been to the Flossburg concentration camp and seen the mine where the Jews, here they were barely fed enough to stay alive. They have to work 12 hours a day carrying these huge granite slabs up and down these steps. And if you fall over, they shoot you and get another one, because after all, they're bringing new ones in all the time. They worked them literally to death. That was the intention. Get as much work out of them as you could, work them until they drop, then bring in another one. Here's a pile of shoes from the victims of Hitler's Holocaust. These are the dead bodies. They just dumped them into massive graves. Again, you ought to do that. This is a rally at Nuremberg. You can see the pulpit there where the man is standing on the bottom of the center of the picture. I stood there and looked out over this huge parade ground, and this whole pulpit area is a long bleacher section, all made out of granite by these Jewish slaves who died in the process of carrying these, granite slabs. They sawed them out of the ground, out of the granite mountain, sawed them into slabs, polished them, transported them for Hitler to build this massive theater at Nuremberg. Hitler strove to do everything in huge, grand scale. As you stand there in that pulpit, you feel real tiny because this area is just massive, giant parade grounds. Hitler wanted to make the individual feel small and expendable, and the cause seem great. That same thing is going on today in our public schools with the environmental movement. You're just one little person, but look, we got to save Mother Earth. The environment is so huge, and you're just so tiny. You're expendable. The cause is great. Same kind of mentality. You got to watch for that. Hitler knew you have to indoctrinate the youth. He closed down Christian schools and began indoctrinating his youth with the Aryan supremacy idea. Hitler kept referring to the Jews as a parasite in the body of nations. And what do you do with a parasite? You try to get rid of it. And he said, the Jews are parasites in his book, Mein Kampf, right here. You can read it for yourself. He said, the Jews are just a parasite. It's interesting, the abortionists today refer to the unborn child as a parasite in the woman's body. Makes you wonder where they got that mentality, huh? During the time Hitler was in control, and even way before that, this was taught, it's still taught today, by the way, that the embryo growing inside the mother has gill slits. It was a German professor, Ernst Haeckel, who made this up in 1869. This influenced the Germans. He traveled all over Germany and converted people to believing in evolution with his big charts. This led to the idea that if evolution is true, then, one race must be superior. And obviously, it's us. That's kind of the way it ended up, 1870, we had Otto von Bismarck. The Bismarck was named after him. Otto von Bismarck started the war, to prove the Germans are superior. If you're going to have a contest to see who's superior, how do you decide? Well, you got to fight it out. We do the same thing today in football, boxing. Who is superior? Let's duke it out and find out. Haeckel was a liar. Here are the drawings that he made on the top. Underneath are actual photographs of these creatures. We covered that in seminar part 4. He was just flat a liar. But that had a strong influence on, and still does today. I read a letter to the editor yesterday from the St. Louis News Post-Dispatch, where this medical doctor wrote in, and they asked me to comment on it because I do every Wednesday morning a radio station in St. Louis. I'm on the air at 7:20 doing a call-in talk show. Have for a long time with the Tim and Al show, KJSL St. Louis. This doctor had written a letter, and they faxed it to me, and he said, we've got proof for evolution. The human embryo has gill slits. This guy's a medical doctor. He ought to know that was proven wrong in 1874. But he's still teaching it. Here, 2001, teaching people, yeah, we got proof for evolution because of the gill slits. I mean, talk about behind the times. Hey, it works. It makes kids believe in evolution. So go ahead and teach it. Hitler was talking to a man one time. This man said, you'll never get me to come into your camp. I'll never be a Nazi. Hitler responded, this new state will give its youth to no one, but will instead take youth and give to youth its own education and its own upbringing. Your child belongs to us already. What are you? He said, you'll pass. We've already got your children. And they did. They put the children in Hitler's training in the school system and made good Nazis out of them. And boy, by the end of the war, I mean, the 13-year-olds were going off to fight for the fatherland. They simply were not going to surrender. They'd been taught, hey, we're superior. We've got to win this war for the good of humanity. In Skokie, Illinois, which is a Chicago suburb, my brother Mark lived there for a while in Skokie, Illinois. In 1993, a man shot a doctor, a plastic surgeon, just shot him and killed him. He told the police he chose a plastic surgeon from the phone book and killed him. Because they, that is the hairdressers and people who make blue-tinted contact lenses, are diluting the Aryan beauty. There is still, today, a very strong Nazi movement. The idea that the white race is superior. That's the basis behind the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. That's the basis behind the shooting at Columbine High School. Those kids at Columbine were strong followers of Adolf Hitler. They did the shooting on Hitler's birthday on purpose. It was to commemorate Hitler. They wanted to eliminate anybody that wasn't up to what they thought was what they're supposed to be. They shot Cassie because she believed in God. They shot Isaiah Shoals just because he was black. That was straight from Hitler. Same kind of philosophy. This book we mentioned earlier, Hitler's Cross by Moody Press and Moody Bible Institute, Chicago, is really good, showing what were the Germans doing, or what were German churches doing, Christians. Hitler used this as a propaganda picture. He's walking out of church. Notice the cross above his head. Hitler's propaganda minister was really good at making people believe, oh, Hitler's a good Christian guy. He's really trying to do what's best for our country. You know, we better follow him. They had Nazi baptisms. These pictures are all from this book right here. Okay? They had Nazi altars. Some churches even took their Bible off the pulpit and read from this book right here, Mein Kampf, preaching German, Aryan supremacy. Hitler said, if you tell the lie long enough and loud enough and often enough, the people will believe it. And they're more likely to believe a big lie than a small one. Boy, that's the truth, too. Okay, so Nazism is founded solidly on the idea of evolution. I don't think you're going to understand World War II until you put it all together and say, that's what happened. We have plenty of books, Final Entries, 1945, The Black Angels, the story of the Waffen SS. Anyway.